It's 5 o'clock, January 26, 2022. This is the regular meeting of the Planning Commission of Carson City. I call the meeting to order and call the roll, please.
Chair Borders,
Present.
Vice Chair Wiggins, Commissioner Eswine, Commissioner Kilgore. No?
Nope.
Commissioner Lloyd. I see you. Commissioner Perry. Commissioner Preston. A quorum's present.
Thank you. Commissioner Preston, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Prior to our public comment, I would like to just welcome back myself and Commissioner Preston, who have been reappointed. Sorry, guys, we've been reappointed for another term. Members of the public are invited to address the commission at this time and comment on any matter that is relevant to or within the authority of the Planning Commission, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. In order for members of the public to participate in the Planning Commission's consideration of an agenda item, the public is strongly encouraged to provide written comments relative to the specific agenda item when called for by the chair or the vice chair during the item itself. Is there any public comment at this time? Please come forward. Sign in over there on that sheet. Press the button so that it turns green and you got it. Is it green? There you go.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Sam Flakus. I am that future generation that the Larkier family assumed would not care about the Virginia and Truckee engine house. And I'm here to tell you that 31 years later, after its demolition, I do care, and my sons care. The Larkiers took away their future by taking away my present, because to this day, I still wake up in the middle of the night seeing Abraham Curry's sandstone magnum opus being attacked by a John Deere excavator. That's not the past, that's the present. That's because someone else didn't care. I shouldn't care either. That's how many of us feel. That even though I didn't own the title to the property, something was stolen from me. Something was stolen from Nevada. Nevada's gold and silver are natural resources to be exhumed and exported, but Nevada's identity is not. Are we for sale simply by association with prostitution? You can forgive someone for thinking there's some concerted conspiracy to remove our sense of place of where we are, so that wherever we go, there will only be McDonald's, Walmart, and the Altair that look exactly like ones that we had already been to. It removes our humanity. We are therefore only consumers. I therefore call on prospective tenants to boycott this development. Thank you.
Any other public comment on an item that's not on the agenda for tonight? Okay. Meeting items. Item 6A, I would like to move to item 6D and take that up at the end of the meeting. Oh, sorry, thank you. Approval of the minutes for December 15th, 2021. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of December 15th? Hearing none, can I have a motion for approval?
Second.
All right. The motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any further discussion? I'm sorry, the motion was by Mr. Wiggins and seconded by Commissioner Preston. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Yes, all right. Commissioner Esseline abstains. All right. Now we're at item 6B, LU 2021-0398. Discussion and possible action regarding a request to amend a special use permit to allow for a 36-unit multifamily apartment complex, LU 2019-007, incorporating additional adjacent parcels into the project site, zoned retail, commercial, and a multifamily apartment located at 1421 North Carson Street, APN 002-136-01-04 and 05. Heather 2.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
I need to disclose something on this one before we get started.
All right.
Okay. So NRS 281A 420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. I serve as president of the Rotary Club of Carson City. Mr. Peckham and Mr. Kopelos, the applicant and architect for this item, are members of the Rotary Club. While I do have a commitment in a private capacity to the Rotary itself, I do not have any commitment in a private capacity to Mr. Peckham or Mr. Kopelos merely by virtue of their membership in Rotary. While I make this disclosure, NRS 281A 420 requires abstention only in clear cases. I do not believe that the independence of my judgment is materially affected by this matter. Therefore, I do not have a disqualifying conflict and will be voting on this matter.
Thank you. I also have a statement. NRS 281A 420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Carson City. Mr. Peckham and Mr. Kopelos, the applicant and the architect for this item, are also members of Rotary. Merely being a member of the Rotary does not give rise to the commitment in a private capacity to the Rotary, Mr. Peckham, or Mr. Kopelos. While I make this disclosure, NRS 281A 420 requires abstention only in clear cases. I do not believe that the independence of my judgment is materially affected in this manner. Therefore, I do not have a disqualifying conflict and will be voting on this matter. Now, Heather.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Heather Manzo, Associate Planner for the record. So many of you commissioners will probably remember a couple of years ago seeing this project in a little bit of a smaller version of itself. The project is generally located on the east side of North Carson Street and on the south side of East Adams Street. The difference between the project today and what was previously approved is that there are 2 additional parcels that are located on the southeast portion of the site and highlighted on the slide. Those 2 additional parcels are within the multifamily apartment zoning district, and as proposed, will include site amenities, parking, and access. The special use permit request that is before you this evening is related to a multifamily project that is proposed within a non-residential zoning district. The development character surrounding the multifamily project has not changed at all. It's still 36 apartment units. The commercial portion has been increased in size as noted in the staff report. And that additional couple of parcels to the southeast of the project site are really intended to provide for adequate parking to address the site as a whole. Staff did receive calls and met with a property owner that owns the 2 parcels to the northeast of the project site. Those parcels do abut the proposed project. And just before the meeting, I did distribute materials that were provided by that owner to be entered into the record, and I do believe that Mr. Georgeson will cover those items when he speaks in a few moments. In speaking with the concerned owner, we did take into consideration and spoke with the applicant about potential additional conditions to further mitigate the potential impacts of this development on those abutting properties. And so late materials were distributed to the Planning Commission yesterday that include 2 additional conditions. Those conditions would, number 1, require that the applicant demonstrate that the detention basins that are proposed will be placed in a manner that will not result in infiltration or impact the crawl spaces of the abutting residences. The soils report and the engineer reports that will go into preparing the building permit packages will likely address where those detention basins need to go. That work hasn't been conducted at this point, but we did want to make sure that the conditions did highlight that that had been an identified concern. The second is there's a dog run that's proposed. It's shown in a backwards C shape in the amenity area on that eastern portion of the site. The additional condition number 18 would require that to be located at least 10 feet away from the abutting property lines. That way, it will potentially reduce the impact of folks taking their dogs to that area and that impact that it may have on the adjacent properties. So the site plan represents a mixed-use development with the commercial office building on the west side of the property on North Carson, and the multifamily project to the east of that, more internal to the site. The applicant is proposing a unique work-live development that will support the fish kind of goals. And so with that, they have requested a reduction to the parking that would be required for the multifamily portion of the site. And the applicant is also proposing that a lot of that work is going to take place on site between the commercial building and the residents there. And those residences are going to be folks who are receiving services directly from fish. In addition to that, the applicant is going to provide shuttle services for those residences to off-site locations. And in addition to that, there is public transit available, and it is a pretty walkable area. So staff was able to make the findings, and there is a condition number 8 that's recommended that would require the use of those apartments for fish-related activities for that first 10 years. And then in terms of building architecture, the commercial and the multifamily buildings are designed as a comprehensive project, and so the materials and architectural elements are carried forward from the residential and the commercial buildings. They do appear to meet our architectural design requirements. And staff is recommending approval, subject to the conditions that are outlined in the staff report and included in the late materials that were provided to the commission. And I'm happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time. And the applicant is here to speak on behalf of their project. Thank you.
Are there questions for staff? Mr. Aswan?
Yeah, I have just several questions about the, one is on the condition number 8, the requirement that they provide a 10-year agreement. What happens if the project doesn't work out in that 10-year period?
That's a great question, Commissioner Eswine. So the project is required to carry that, that condition for the first 10 years. So if another project were to come into place, this approved special use permit may come into question. If it were to be transferred over to a regular, apartment building, this SUP does not address that approval, and so it would likely require the applicant to come back to this board.
And then my next question is, the condition of East Park Street, the water and sewer lines there, the staff report said that the lines were deteriorated. The current condition is deteriorated. In that case, why are we having the applicant pay the cost of reinstalling that equipment when it's in the city's right-of-way at the moment? And the city generally would be responsible for doing that.
This is Stephen Pote with Carson City Development Engineering for the record. So the concern with those mains was, in addition to the new connections, also the surface improvements that are required because of this project were considered to be a threat to that main just because of the condition that if that were allowed to stay as is, it would probably fail from the compaction.
So it's not going to fail just from the regular traffic that's there for how many years?
Correct. We anticipate that it wouldn't be required to be replaced.
Okay.
Could we answer that question for you?
Yes, you can, but wait till we,
And then just a question on the commercial building, you're requiring that they do a traffic analysis. Is that only because it's a new building? Or we don't require traffic analysis for any business that goes into an existing facility, do we?
Stephen Pote again. So the requirement for the traffic impact study includes cumulative impacts. And so that's the nature behind that condition, is that because it's one site with multiple tenants, and since we don't know what's going in there, we're looking at the cumulative impact at that point once those are brought forward.
any other questions for staff? Applicants?
I gotta have a spiel too.
Thank you. Just
First
Jim
of all-
Peckham for the
First of all,
record.
Mr. Peckham, there are, currently, there are, 17, 18 conditions of approval? Have you read all of those, and are you familiar with them? Are they acceptable to you?
I've got questions,
All
just so
right.
that I understand that we're all on the same page.
That's fine.
And
Proceed.
just to update the record, when we were considering buying the site that we're discussing right now is when we came to get a special use permit to make sure one was available before we spent the money to buy the site. And so it's been going on for 2 years. And again, the whole program is set up to be able to help people that are underemployed. It kind of gets rid of in my mind, a blight that location, and then be able to help people who never had the opportunity to get advanced education, which is required for an awful lot of the employers in the region. And so our whole goal is to use that housing to develop people, get them some additional technical education so that they can fill some of the other jobs around town. And we will provide a shuttle. In fact, I have already started the purchase of a shuttle. I don't know if you know this, but the dealerships around town don't sell cars or trucks anymore. They just order them for you. And in 4 to 12 months, that shuttle will be here. You know, we're ready to do that. We'd like to think that we're making a positive impact on the community. We talked about revitalizing Carson City to make it look better, revitalizing the workforce, and then revitalizing the families, because the families who come with the students will be developed as well. So we're working on trying to eliminate a piece of generational poverty. So that's kind of the whole concept. It's transitional living. They can live there while they're in the program. There's multiple steps, probably 5 steps that they have to be able to get through before we actually put them into technical training at the community college and apprenticeships and things of that sort. So that's the whole concept. There was a question about us replacing the utilities in Park Street. I want to just add that the city was kind enough to give us a grant that covers about 1/3 of the cost. So that was very helpful, and we knew that kind of going into this whole thing. So we've been fundraising and whatnot accordingly. So that wasn't a surprise to us at all. I've never, on Section 8, we were talking about that, both the transport but also the development agreement. I've never signed a development agreement. I don't know what necessarily, I don't know what we, I probably don't have any problem doing that, but I'm not really sure what all would be in that and what we're trying to avoid. And I do know that there's been a lot of flexibility to try and help us around parking, given the fact that we don't feel that there's going to be very many people there with multiple cars in the family, and similar to some other sites. And also with the whole transportation thing, I don't know how much you folks on the committee are involved, but we want to encourage, if there's any way to get bus stops located near that site, that would be an additional helpful thing. We've talked with the transit people in the past and have brought up concerns. So, you know, encouraging them to incorporate their new bus stops accordingly and close to that. So we'll start with number 8, and then I don't know if Heather has any insight, or she can give me any insight into what the developmental agreement is. That would help me.
Heather?
Thank you. Yes, so per condition 8, the agreement is solely for the purpose of obligating the applicant for that period of 10 years from the date of the issuance of certificate of occupancy for the operations that you've proposed. So essentially, it will probably be a pretty simple document, just, you know, stipulating that requirement.
I think the fear is you build an apartment house and next year you decide to change your mind. And the city's trying to get you to at least work at it for 10 years.
Okay,
And
simple enough.
I think that's basically the crux of what you're asking for.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, and a lot of people in the community think that Fish is just a thrift store, and the ones that know that we're more than a thrift store think we're the homeless people, and the reality is both of those are small portions of what we do. Most of our clients are people that we're giving, again, a hand up as opposed to a handout, helping them so that their next month is better than last month, and working with the working poor, and so this is just another step in the whole thing. So I don't see that as an issue, and we have no intention of, doing any of our homeless shelters in the downtown area or anything of that sort.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Yes. Commissioner Wiggins?
Yeah, Commissioner Wiggins, for the record. Since we are on the parking topic, and that's what number 8 is, I noticed some numbers were kind of different in your report. Page 2 said 7 out of 11 applicants had vehicles. Other places, and I think that was what's kind of driving that requirement 8. But when I look at the numbers that are proposed and versus what are typically required, I think you can make it work. I think if every one person that was in one apartment, they could have one vehicle and there's still plenty of parking. Is that something you guys would maybe enforce? Because I think what the fear is for folks is that maybe it's not a job training program, or maybe everyone needs a vehicle to get to their job that they just acquired from this, and now the place is full of cars, now the neighborhoods are full of cars around it. So I don't know if there was a way you guys could say, as part of this program, you get one parking spot for your unit, and that's the max. And that would alleviate some of this concern. That would probably have to be the case if this changed to another program after 10 years or before that. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, we will definitely manage the parking to make sure that we don't have issues. That we were a part of developing Richards Crossing, which is another facility in town. We were required to put in 72 parking spots, and on average, 12 people park there for some of the same clientele that we're currently dealing with. And we use that as part of the communication in the various meetings with the city to make them aware that we don't see that parking thing to be an issue. Again, we want to try and have bus service as close as possible, and our plan is to shuttle people in addition. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could have a couple comments here. I'm looking at the report here from the planning department, and it says that there's proposed 60 on-site parking spaces for 36 apartments. So the number is 1.67 per unit. Heather, what is if this was just a normal requirement like an apartment complex, what would it be per unit? 2?
Thank you. Yes, it would be 2.
Okay, so it's just a bit below that. It's not quite there. I had one other comment on item number 8, the requirement to run the shuttle. And I'm just trying to think this out, fast forwarding into the future. So in the development agreement, and this is really to the city staff, I would not like to, I wouldn't want to see it be that Fish had to run a shuttle empty all the time just because they had to run a shuttle in case the people are either driving to the college or they're catching public transportation. So I would think that in the development agreement, it would be wise to have something that says if there's a bus stop there and if the tenants do not have a need or a demand for a shuttle, that they wouldn't have to automatically require it, so that we don't have buses running around empty.
Thank you, Commissioner Perry. And yes, that would be the intent, is to have them run their shuttle based on the need.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wiggins?
Commissioner Wiggins, for the record. Yeah, Commissioner Perry, just to clarify, I think the spaces go up because there's commercial as part of this project. So the spaces required, it's on one of their pages, is 72 for the residential and 46 for the commercial. But I'm in full agreement, we don't need that many, but just in case.
Commissioner Preston?
My question is if for 36 units you needed to, on a typical space, have 2 parking spaces per, what's happened now is the component of the commercial has now nearly quadrupled. So what would be the parking requirement for the commercial and a regular apartment complex if we were doing this, or how are we just ignoring this because of the 10-year agreement?
Thank you, Commissioner Preston. We are not ignoring anything. So what we looked at is we looked at what the parking rate was for the apartments when the SUP was originally approved. And we kept with that rate. They actually are parking it a little bit more. I think there's like 3 more parking spaces on site for the multifamily portion. And then the commercial portion is really going to be based on what the mix of the interior square footage is. We use the 1 per 3,000 just as a guesstimate. So in terms of the parking for the multifamily use, they're providing about 3 more parking spaces than the Planning Commission had previously approved. And they have added that additional parking on site to accommodate the larger commercial building. In addition to that, there are, while they don't get to really count it, there are going to be on-street parking spaces along the south, east, and north portions of the site.
Okay. And then I have another question. Joe?
As far as audio visual is concerned, that TV in the back is blank.
Okay. And I have another question from Mr. Peckham, is what kind of commercial are you intending to put in there since now it's quadrupled its size?
Yeah. Just also for the record, again, Jim Peckham. The top floor, so a third of the building is actually going to be a training center for the people that live in that complex. And then what we're hoping is to have some kind of coffee shop, ice cream, some kind of food services on the main floor. And then the rest of it, it might be other nonprofits that are there, it might, be office space. It's just, as we start to build, we expect we'll generate interest. So 1/3 of the building is going to be used by the same people that are already living in the apartments. So that kind of reduces that. But as we're talking about parking, I guess on code, on the far east side, the way we originally drew the exit, apparently that exit is a little bit too close to the corner. And again, it's a street that's not very busy. And the proposed fix will actually take away 5 parking spots. I guess that's up for, for a decision if instead of going out on, what's that, Fall Street there? Yes. So instead of going out on Fall Street, the fix is, which is easier for the fire department to be able to go through as they like that positioning from what they've told us, would have to have it come out on Park Street and it would negatively impact parking.
We received some comments about the retention basins. Can you, Mr. Koplos, could you address some of that for us?
Actually, we thought we could go through a couple of these conditions of approval
All
before we
right.
got to those. One of them was number 12. Seemed like a chicken and an egg type of thing. They're asking for us to remove a driveway apron before we get a permit. And we're not quite too sure that wording is correct.
Though the thought, this is Jim Peckham, the thought is that driveway will not exist. I mean, it'll probably have fencing across it during the construction, and at the end, it will not exist because that's right where the commercial building is. The only question is, do we have to go and tear that up and put in sidewalks and curbs before we tear up everything and put in sidewalks and curbs again?
Chair Borders, would you like me to address
Please.
each one? Okay. So in terms of that condition, what it really means is that before that site improvement permit gets issued, the removal of that driveway needs to be on that permit. So it would be at the same time, just on the same plans.
It should say that it doesn't say that.
So concurrent with the issuance as opposed to prior.
Yeah, the
hopefully.
permit would not be issued without that being shown on the plan.
Mr. Koplos, anything else?
I had just a couple other questions. we were kind of confused. The zoning apparently is RC for where the apartments are, but we're unsure what the setbacks for the apartments should be. Should they be part of RC zoning, or should they be part of multifamily? Just in our own clarification. I mean, we're particularly interested in what should the setback be on Adams Street? Should it be for apartment? Should it be 0 lot line except for a 6-foot landscape buffer? We're just not sure what. Page 9 of the report, under paragraph 2, then the third paragraph down, it starts to address what some of the landscape setbacks are, but we don't know if how does that affect the buildings? I mean, can we use a 6-foot at Adams and push the apartment closer to Adams Street? Or
Heather?
Sure, Heather Manzo. So many of the setbacks for the RC zone are 0. However, there is an increased setback where it abuts the residentially zoned property. And I'd be happy to discuss this offline with you
okay,
tomorrow.
cool.
However, yes, the landscape setback is going to kind of trump the 0 along the street frontages. So that's why the staff report laid it out that way.
The other issue is the landscape setback on Carson Street. We don't have a problem with providing whatever that setback needs to be, but we also would like to create a plaza in front of the building so that whatever food establishment we have on the commercial property, they can use it for outdoor seating. And I don't know how that relates to landscape setback.
Heather?
Again, so Carson Street, because it's an arterial, requires a 10-foot landscape buffer. In reviewing the proposed site plan, it may be that the on-street parking on Carson may not work just because of geometrics and what's required for pulling in and out for a parallel parking space. So if the on-street parking were removed, there's completely adequate room to provide that 10-foot landscaping along the frontage. If not, if the parking is provided, then the applicant will need to demonstrate that the requirement's been met through the design.
But can we do a paver plaza as part of that, or does that all have to be landscape across there?
Again, I think it would be appropriate to discuss with staff offline how the requirements could be met.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. I don't think we're here to re-engineer it.
I got
I
you.
think
Well,
we're
it was
just
in the
here- yeah.
report, so I
Yep.
had to,
Okay.
wanted to talk about those.
Would you address the retention basin for me?
Yeah, the last thing is the retention basin.
Wait,
The only-
before we get there, I got one more.
Oh,
Just-
go for it.
And because you just kind of hit on it, what we were hoping to do is have some of the same look and feel as the downtown with the pull in, pull out. And so on page 9, at the very bottom, letter B, 4B, it talks about that we would have, I think that's where it is. I think it's talking about, but anyway, someplace in there it's more pronounced that everything has to be in the right of way. And I think what we've designed it is that 2 feet of that parking spot would actually be on our property as opposed to in the right of way. And again, that was just something I was trying to have to make it look more like the downtown area, be consistent with that. And apparently that also creates some kind of problems with the landscape. And I mean, it would provide a couple of extra parking spaces for anybody that's visiting that commercial site.
Mr. Preston?
When I looked at this and saw the little indent, because I do a lot of work downtown, I thought that would be for your bus stop. Because we do have bus stops downtown where they're not allowed for parking, they're actually allowed for the bus stop. So, because I don't see any other place on your property that would be conducive to a bus stop. if you want us to have that kind of support. So eating outside, bus stop, you know.
For whatever reason, the bus, what do they call it, jump around Carson, they don't have any vehicles on Carson Street at all.
They're trying to eliminate Carson Street traffic with the buses and just have them run on the side streets, is what they've told us.
Yeah.
But
Things could change, but we approached them one time about that, and that was the answer we got.
If I may, Chair Borders?
Yes.
I did want to just call to attention that the request is for the multifamily use on the commercial zoned property, and that commercial building really isn't a part of the special use permit. So a lot of these things could be discussed offline as part of the commercial development on the Carson Street frontage.
Okay. Is that
Okay, in
acceptable to-
regard to the detention basin, the only thing we would like within the finding or the recommend conditions of approval is that it's within whatever is Carson City code, that there's nothing extraordinary to the Carson code as far as detention basins within city engineering and drainage.
And just, we want to make improvements to Carson City, and we certainly don't want to create any new challenges for any of our neighbors.
Okay. All right. Public comment? Any other, I'm sorry. Commissioner Lloyd?
I have no comment.
Do you have any questions or comments? I'm sorry, I've been ignoring you. Thank you. Public comment? Yep. You've already signed in?
My name is George Georgeson.
Sir, can you pull the microphone a little closer to you?
Okay.
Just the whole thing. There you go.
I,
And
Good evening.
identify yourself again for the.
yeah,
for
good
the tape.
evening, Commissioners. My name is George Georgeson. I own the two parcels adjacent to this project on the northeast corner of Adams.
Okay,
and-
you're gonna have to get this a little closer. There you go.
Okay, good evening.
Wonderful,
Okay.
wonderful. Thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes. My name is George Georgeson. I am the owner of the property on the northeast corner of the block, both parcels. I have owned them for 45 years. And I have taken a look at this proposed project, and in general, I am not against it, this proposed development. However, I do have an objection to the site plan as showing. My main objection is with the proposed retention basins shown less than 4 feet from the property line that is adjacent to the property that I own. The existing house was built 1940, is directly adjacent to the proposed detention basin. The house is approximately 3 feet from the property, so the proposed 50-foot by 20-foot wide detention basin is shown less than 7 feet from the house. In other words, from the house to the detention basin. And there is a crawl space under the house. This crawl space is close to 2 feet below grade, and in some cases it's deeper because this old house had these old heaters on the floor where you radiate heat up, and those areas are a little deeper than most of the crawl space. And the property, my property, is about 1 foot below the property that's going to be developed. The soils in this area are very sandy, silty soils and very permeable. In the past, I've had one of my tenants call me that there was water underneath the house, and I was wondering where the water is coming from. We finally found out that it was from a broken sewer line from the adjacent building that's in the Fish property right now. As a result of the soils that are very permeable, the soils became saturated in the adjacent property and in mine. The sewer water infiltrated through the soils into the lowest point of the crawl space under the house. I called the Carson City Health Department at the time to see if they could have the owners fix this sewer spill, and eventually they did get together and the issue was resolved. A few months down the line from then, when it was resolved, the water under the house went away. Now, you probably think, what do I know about soils? What do I know about water? I'm a licensed civil engineer and I have been for 40 years. So I'm pretty familiar with it. Placing the detention bases close to the parcel line can be detrimental and make an impact on the adjacent property. Question 7 of the findings asks if the development will not result in material damage or prejudice to other properties in the vicinity. I would like to see the detention basins placed substantially away from the adjoining property lines so that my property will not be negatively affected by infiltrating water into the property itself. While the existing house is my greatest concern because of the crawl space, currently, I also do not want to see detention bases to impact any other portion of my property that might hinder future development of these two parcels. I would like to see the condition 17 be amended to include the protection of the entire adjoining property boundary from being negatively impacted of this proposed placement of the detention basins. And that's what I'm asking. I don't have any problem with it. In fact, it's a good idea to develop this property. I think they're doing a good job, but the basins need to be moved because they do affect the properties around it. These soils are very weak and very, very permeable. And they have a very, very low percolation rate. So with that, thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions?
Nope.
Where would you put the detention basin if you're,
I'm glad you asked. If you look at the last page of my submittal, it has a small contour interval. The contour interval you've seen came down from USGS. I downloaded it from USGS. And it is a 2-foot contour interval. So if you look at the detention basins, they are between contour 4708 and 4706, would be 4707. The lowest point is on the corner of Park Street and Fall, which is 4704. So you're 3 feet lower than the basin at that corner. So how are you going to get water from that corner to those two basins? You can't. It's uphill unless you want to pump it. So those things have to be located. And I'm sure the engineer who's going to do the engineering of this project is going to realize that you cannot flow water uphill.
thank you.
Okay.
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Stephen? The condition number 17, how do you demonstrate that?
So that would be done with doing some testing to find out what the actual perk rates are of the soil, and then determining the distance to the house and ensuring that the water is not going to be migrating underground and seeping into the crawl space.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Preston?
The other thing I wanted to clarify, is this a dog run or a dog park?
Thank you, Commissioner Preston. That is not a dog park. It's my understanding that it would be utilized by residents that may own a dog, so they would take their dogs for a walk into that area. So it would be a dog stop.
But it's not like a dog run where there would be dogs in there 24/7 until they decided to come home or whatever. The dogs would not be there.
Correct. It's the applicant's intent not to have unattended animals there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment at this time?
Guess I gotta sign in here.
Hello.
Yes, you got it.
For the record, I'm Robert Potter, and my wife and I own the parcel across the street from George. On your paperwork, it shows up as 00213-501. Anyhow, originally, the project was away from us being the Fall Street people. And now we got some new property added to this project. Logically, I mean, as a developer, I would want to do the same thing. But my concerns, and they're exacerbated today by the mention of a coffee shop, which obviously has a lot of in and out traffic, and the requirements for parking are, well, there's potentially 3 in the front, but it might be a place to sit down and eat, so that could go away. And then in the back, I count 6 or 7. So either it's going to be something like Landrum's over in Reno where you get a stool, or whatever. I don't see coffee shop flow traffic. I eat at a lot of coffee shops, all of them. Anyway, back to this, originally there was a driveway, well, there is currently a driveway curb cut coming out on Park Street, and I didn't hear any mention about it being abandoned or maintained. And then originally when I talked to one of the people that was doing this project, they told me the driveway was coming out on Adams Street. So I visualized, and the drive-through would be Adams to Park. Now, I'm not sure exactly what they got planned, but it looks like they want to come out onto Fall Street, which is right in the middle of a school zone. So I guess what the proposal is we're going to bring potentially commercial traffic and the shuttle and anybody else in and out of a school zone. And what about this Park Street curb cut? Is that going to still be there? And the comment about the Fire Street would prefer a straight drive-through is worth considering. So, there you go. That's something to chew on, huh?
Thank you.
Anyway, basically, I like the idea of the downtown development. I am concerned with traffic flow. I like the lady's question about where the bus stop's going to be. It seems like a lot of people head into the neighborhood. The man made a comment, it's a quiet street. Yeah, it's kind of like why I bought it. Been there for 4 years. So just want to keep it that way. And George's concerns are relative. I'm an engineer, or was. Well, at least that's before I retired. I can't remember how to get there anymore, but yeah, you got to bring the water to the lowest point on the property. That's just the way the game's played. So that takes out the exit onto Fall Street, which would satisfy my concerns. So I'm with George. I like the detention basin on the southeast corner of the proposed development. and I'd like to see the driveways maintained as a drive-through from Fall to Adams. And some concerns need to be addressed about this parking for the proposed coffee shop. They may have to give up a couple of their preferred residential spots to make sure there's enough for the retail and somehow kind of discourage drive-throughs. But whatever, good luck. Thank you kindly.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, ma'am.
Just wondering if you wanted me to follow up on anything?
Not yet. I got one more.
Go ahead.
Hello. I haven't addressed the Planning Commission in quite a while.
Please identify yourself for the record.
My name is Eileen Potter. I live on the property across the street from George, heading east. We have 2 curb cuts, approaches for parking, one on Adams, one on Fall. When we bought the house, I went to the city and asked them about improving the sidewalks, because the kids walk on Adams Street, and then they walk south on Fall to the bus stop. There's 2 bus stops there, high school, middle school. Okay? And I asked for, would the city consider providing money so that we could improve and put sidewalks in? And then here comes, namely, predominant people who want to provide public services, for the good of the community. And they won't even consider sidewalks for the school zones, for the kids to walk. Because this parking you're proposing, right, is going to come out into Fall. So you have Timbers, daycare, you have a multi-apartment on, that's on the, southeast corner of the property. Robert's house, the historical mansion, is fronting 395 North Carson Street. Okay, they have activities there in the summer and during other times of the year, special events. Okay, then you got the school, Pioneer High. Buses come down the street. The big trucks from Sinclair, when they load, they have to drop their load, their gasoline load, right? They come down the street too. And I just wanted sidewalks for the kids, so they didn't have to walk and meander in between the parked cars to get to school. And their parents, for the high school and middle school, either drop their kids off at the stop by Pioneer High, or the kids, like I said, if they're parked and they're waiting to pick up their children or their kids in high school, they have to stop and wait, of course, when school lets out. And I didn't want the kids walking and meandering between the cars on the street. So I think that if you're going to allow Fish to put sidewalks in and improvements, I think you should extend that courtesy to the school zone and our property and George's as well, because the kids do walk. Right now, they walk. Our fence George has a wooden fence on the backside going to the south and east. Our chain link is all the way around our property. We have a front on Adams and a side front on Fall. Chain link. And I asked the city if we could improve and put a sidewalk there, so the kids could walk our entire property, as they already do on dirt, to get to school. So if they can extend a courtesy to Fish and improve that side for sidewalks, I think they should improve George's, but that's not my concern, that's his. But my concern is, I would like to see the sidewalks that adjoin my property line so that the kids could safely walk to school. Because now you're bringing in all these other cars. They live in a bubble at Fish. I don't. I back out into Fall all the time. I drive down Adams, drive down Park, doesn't matter. There's cars there all the time. I just don't want the kids having to walk in the street, meander through, whatever. And I have to say, some of the reason why the kids walk in the street is because when people walk their dogs back and forth, or when the homeless population decides to use a restroom other than at Fish, the kids, I don't want the kids to have to deal with that. Sorry to have to say it. Watched it, see it, and, here we are. I think there should be something done to improve the sidewalks inside the school zone, because the school zone sign's on my property. And I really want the sidewalks improved so the kids can walk safely, so they don't have to step in human excrement, dog excrement, or anything else that these people have deposited. Sorry to have to bring it up.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, just for the record, people are really kind about picking up after their dogs and themselves, but they don't necessarily have to, and they don't have to care either. But my husband does a damn good job trying to pick up after animals or people who leave things behind. I'm glad you smiled at that, sir, Mr. Wiggins. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comment at this time?
I'll be real quick.
All right.
My name,
No, make it green.
there
There
we
you
go.
go.
There we go. My name is Darren Georgeson. I'm George's son. And I just want to drive home the point that there was talk about, oh, you do a perk test and design the basin, and we'll know where the water flows. When water goes underground, you don't know exactly where it's going to go. Usually, it can hit a hard pan, it can go in this direction, it can go in that direction. But this has already been tested because there was a spill on that property in the vicinity of the detention basin, and it did saturate the soils on my father's property, and it did get under the house. And as bad as it is to have water underneath your house, the worst part of it is that when the soils are saturated, they become weak. I'm a civil engineer as well. And your foundation can be severely damaged. So his concern, it goes beyond just having a little water under your house. And it has been tested. So I just want to drive that point home. We've seen what happens when an abnormal amount of water gets concentrated in that area. And that's it. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Thank you. Is that better? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Please sign in.
Yes, sir. My name is Tom Gibbons, for the record, or not for the record. I've been a Carson citizen for close to 50 years. I have a practice in town. I've been in front of you folks before, and I appreciate the service. I don't know what it'd take on my part to contribute to the community like you folks do. I wasn't going to mention anything because my properties are slightly out of the zone. I'm concerned about the city because I love the city. I have a office on the corner of Fifth Street and Division. I have a fair amount of real estate in the area. My concern that I've seen take place in the last 20, 25 years, when I used to be able to pretty much point out the homeless in Carson, we all kind of knew, we waved, we said, in fact, there was one gentleman had the nickname the Waver back before the freeway went through. My property is probably isolated enough that I was morally concerned about Carson, and I realized in talking with Hope that technically speaking, the Carson Street is outside the city district, but I was concerned until I saw this additional memorandum regarding the possibility of apartments on Carson Street per se. We've seen Carson change dramatically over the number of years, from the point of being a small town, even though it's a capital, to a point to the homeless population here is dramatically increased. And I can understand if I would be a little more concerned, I guess, or upset if my home, like the others here, fronted fish. I've been very much a supporter of fish too, so it's not that. I just want to make sure that their issues are addressed, including sidewalks and maybe that detention zone. And I understand we're trying to do the best for those less fortunate. But I would also concerned about our city and that the number of hotels, motels have turned into low-income housing, and that we don't continue to get towards the core of the city, which has historic significance, and allow that to be turned over as well. So I think the concerns voiced by the other individuals here that have spoken just recently, not about the project itself, but addressing their issues because they border it far more closely than my property on Corbett and John. So I think that should be addressed. And I'm also very concerned that they can continue, because it was initially indicated that the property on Carson Street would be a commercial venture, that it's not turned into an additional apartment complex. And you may have already addressed that as well. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? You already had your shot.
I have a postscript. Is there any mention about the staging aspect of Nevada Day, because they stage?
Ma'am, if you're going to make a comment, you have to come up here, but that's not part of this issue.
You said public comment.
Okay. But it's public comment on this issue, but you're more than welcome to come up here and state it so it can be part of the record.
Oh, I'll give you your pen back. Thank you. I'll do that. Okay, so just,
You've already signed in.
yes. I know I've signed in. I'm good. Okay, jeez. Really?
Could you state your name again, please?
My name is Eileen Potter. And it just dawned on me about the staging aspect of the Nevada Day Parade. The staging areas go down to south down to John Street. I believe that's the last stage area for the Nevada Day Parade. And they encompass all the way north to, I want to guess, Bath Street. I'm going to just say Bath Street on the east side. So I just was wondering if at any point in time in this entire project, encompassing how many ever months or years, are they going to address the fact that staging happens for Nevada Day Parade in the neighborhood directly surrounding this apartment complex? And I didn't get a smile or chuckle out of you on that one, Mr. Wiggins, so I appreciate it. And I'm glad you were paying attention.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Oh, yes, and as the gentleman brought your pen back.
Any other public comment at this time? Hearing none, Heather, would you like to take a shot at some of that?
Sure. Heather Manzo for the record. So There were a lot of comments that were related to a variety of things, but hopefully I'm able to summarize a response. If I miss anything, please just let me know. So I did hear that a coffee shop and potentially a drive-through may be proposed. I did want to just let everyone know that the commercial building doesn't have an identified occupant at this time. And all of those commercial uses are allowed in the zone in which the commercial building is being proposed. With that said, their site plan does not propose and could not accommodate a drive-through facility. In terms of where the driveway locations are proposed, as the applicant had proposed them, there is one on East Adams Street between the commercial and the residential component, and it goes straight south down to East Park Street. And then there would be a 90-degree connection to a driveway access at North Fall Street. The staff report did identify some potential concerns with the North Fall access. However, if the applicant could meet all the distance requirements and access requirements that are that apply to driveways going onto public right-of-way, then the site could accommodate that access. In terms of some of the other uses and traffic generated within this area, those are all items that are taken into consideration with site design and as part of that traffic letter that's going to be required in the future. And as in terms of sidewalks, the city does require for a new development to install sidewalks where they're either in disrepair or non-existent. And so as part of this project, the applicant will be required to install sidewalks along their frontages. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to extend, there's no nexus to require them to extend it any further. And so other sidewalks within the area will be improved or installed as redevelopment occurs, or as capital improvement projects may rise to the top of the list of priorities. And then in terms of the other items that were discussed, they really are more of an engineering type element, including the drainage and detention ponds and those kinds of things.
Stephen Poteoth, Development Engineering again. Just to reiterate, staff is content with the conditions as they're provided, coupled with the development standards that govern the construction of these. The neighbors' concern about the permeability of the soil is what led us to add that condition. And we think with the additional analysis that it can be addressed.
You want to say that again?
The condition that's being added, I think that was 17, requires, so I'll just read it here. Prior to the issuance of a site improvement permit, the applicant shall demonstrate that the detention basins have been located and designed in a manner that infiltration will not impact the crawl spaces of the abutting residences. So we're requiring additional analysis of the soils to ensure that that's not impacting the neighbors.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Relative to the parade, annually, the Nevada Day Parade Committee needs to seek a special use permit and a street closure permission from the city. So it's not given that the staging would stay static. The city reviews that annually, and if it needed to be modified for any reason, the city would request that modification. And since the city owns the roads, the city has that authority.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. All right. Commissioner Preston?
I really would like to see this word dog run removed, because to me that seems like a structure. And so that's one of the things I wanted to put in there. I mean, maybe a dog curbing area, or I don't care, or dog walking area, but run to me implies a structure.
Which item is that? 18. Dog walk? Mr. Preston? I'm sorry, Commissioner Wiggins, the other Preston.
Yeah. Commissioner Wiggins, for the record, on 17, it's very specific to not impacting the crawl spaces of abutting residences. Stephen, would it be too difficult to say instead of the crawl spaces of abutting residences, adjoining property?
I wouldn't have any problem with that change.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So
Go ahead, Mr. Perry.
listening to the drainage and the study here and Mr. Georgeson there, looking at the topo lines, I have to ask the applicant, is this, I mean, have you done a drainage study here? Do you realize you're 2 feet higher here? Or is the detention basin possible that it's going to end up somewhere else on the lot once you've done that and see where the water actually drains to? Mr. Kopelos, come on forward here.
We didn't bring our civil engineer with us tonight, but most likely where the dog walk area is most likely the place where the drainage is, because it is the lowest spot. But we also plan on an area between the 2 apartment buildings. I mean, we can go as low as 6 inches for the amount of square footage of space and take a lot of the volume of drainage at that point, which, is a considerable distance from the property.
Okay.
There's also the opportunities to go down with infiltration as opposed to surface. It's got to be studied. I know we have a soils report, but it's got to be studied.
So if this is approved tonight, basically that part of this layout can change, right?
Yeah, it
Because
will
I mean,
change.
item 1 says all developments shall be substantially in compliance with the special use permit plans and application materials, but those things can be modified as the process moves
Right,
forward, right?
exactly.
These are not final.
Yeah. Our civil engineer was reluctant to start work on the site until we had a special use permit
Okay.
approved. That was what the basis was. And yeah, there's already some issues and conditions where we're going to change the plan. We are not going to have the driveway on Fall Street. It's just not practical to do that. So we're going to have 2 exits on Park. We just got to review it with the fire department to see that they're going to be happy with it. I hope we don't get caught between 2 departments in terms of what's going to happen with
That would never
design.
happen in this city.
No, not in this community.
You've answered my question. Thank you. I did have one other one, and this is, not related to the project, but sidewalks, and something that has been, we've seen many times here to answer your question there. I mean, historically, it's new development that brought sidewalks in, because just like here, this is new development and it's in the code that it requires sidewalks, and that's how they get built. But there are neighborhoods, and I walked around Mr. Georgeson's yard the other day and saw that there were no sidewalks and thought, oh no, another part of the city that doesn't have them. But it was probably developed prior to when the code required sidewalks, which means there's 2 ways to get sidewalks. Either the resident says, I want to build a sidewalk, and goes and works with the city and does it. Did you? Okay.
Yeah, I was denied.
You were denied
Yes.
for you to build the sidewalk.
Yes, because I said I'd pick up some of the costs, and the city said no.
Okay. So maybe I can ask the city engineer to come up and comment on that, and how, areas that don't have sidewalks are prioritized as resources are available.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Perry, for the question. Randall Rice, city engineer for the record. It really is a problem. If you've read our reports, we're way behind on funding, and it's just not feasible to capture everywhere. We wish we could. I mean, I would love to if that was our full-time job, to correct some of these deficiencies that we have. We have started working with the redevelopment authority to ask them for money every year and to try to capture grant funding to try to increase the impact that we're having on these sidewalks. And so we're making great headway. That started last year. We're looking forward to delivering our first project next year. So we're working on the design currently. We're going to continue to ask the redevelopment authority for that downtown, but unfortunately, this area is a little bit further north than that would be allowed to use that money. So we would prioritize that based on, you know, the number of complaints, you know, the amount of traffic, the adjacency to bus stops, where it's needed for ADA access, you know, access to food security and things like that. So certainly it's on the top of our mind. It's a very important topic for us. We would love to solve all problems, but of course, funding is the biggest downfall.
Thank you. So the residents that are here tonight that brought that up, if they like did a letter and all, would that be like a complaint that it would elevate it up the ladder a little bit?
Certainly, you know, using the Carson Connect would be a great tool for them if they could log in and cite that complaint. We do track those. It does come across our streets crews, so they do note that. Right now, our street crews have a 6-year backlog, but getting on the list is the first part of that plan. And so if you get that out there, we can certainly put it on the priority list and evaluate it.
Well, there's a direction for you at least.
And I do, basically, what he reiterated today was reiterated just verbally. It wasn't on record. So I appreciate that he reiterated the same answer that was given to me on record now. This is good.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Mr. Lloyd, are you okay? Okay,
Heather answered all my questions.
thank you. Anything else from the commission? Sir, we've already, the public comment period is over. Well, why don't you talk with her when we have a recess?
Mr. Chair, none of the comments that are off microphone can be captured on the record.
Absolutely, thank you. All right, commission. What's your pleasure? Commissioner Preston?
I'd like to have the applicant agree to the conditions, because they haven't
Okay.
agreed.
Jim Peckham from Fish, for the record, and yes, we agree with the conditions that are set forth and agree that we'll meet with the planning department to make sure that we're on the same page of what everything measures up appropriately based on Heather's request or suggestion.
And you don't have a problem calling it a dog walk?
No, not at all.
All right.
And there is not going to be a shelter over there, but wherever that dog walk is, we just know that increasingly people have pets, and we want to try and limit where all they're taking the pets and be able to control where they take their pets.
Okay. Thank you for that. Did you have, Mr. Williams, did you have another comment?
I was
Changing of the,
Yeah, would you be okay with number 17 instead of crawl spaces of the abutting residences adjoining property to the applicant?
Absolutely.
You're okay with?
Yeah, that's it. The one house, as I understand it, is probably it's a sandstone building. It's a beautiful building. It's historic. We wouldn't want to do anything that would cause any kind of damage to that particular building or any neighbor building for that matter.
Thank you.
okay.
I'll make a motion.
All right, go ahead.
I move to recommend approval of special use permit LU-2021-0398 based on the ability to make the required findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report and amended in staff's memo dated January 25th, 2022, with the changes to staff's memo of adjoining property, adding that rather than crawl spaces of the abutting residences, and then changing dog run to dog walk in condition 18.
Is there a second?
Could I add one other thing that we touched on earlier, item 12, where it says prior to the issuance of the permit, which should be concurrent with the issuance of the site improvement permit. So I guess I'm asking to amend the motion just for that one item, number 12.
You include that in your motion?
Yes.
All right.
Including item 12, changing prior to concurrent with the issuance.
Okay. Any further discussion? Is there a second? All right, Commissioner Esselstyn seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no.
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd, thumbs up. Thank you. All right. LU 2021-0449, discussion and possible action regarding a request for a special use permit for a multifamily apartment complex on property zone general commercial and multifamily apartment located at 1630, 1636, and 1650 Brown Street and 3679 and 3689 Gordon Street. APN 008-303-15-1621, 36, 37, and 39. Heather.
Thank you. Heather Manzo, for the record. So this project site is located on the west side of Brown Street and to the south of Gordon Street, although it doesn't have direct frontage on Gordon Street, so the only access point will be from Brown.
Can you all take your discussion outside? Thank you.
Sorry. The project's proposed to be constructed over 2 phases. Phase 1 is primarily on the multifamily apartment portion of the site, which are the 3 parcels on the east side of the site. However, some of Phase 1 will encroach onto the commercially zoned property on the west side of the site to include access, parking, and then some detention area. The multifamily use is proposed in a non-residential zone, and that does require a special use permit. Because the site is being proposed and each phase relies upon the other, we are taking a look at the site as one project as a whole. And so what's being proposed are 78 apartment units. And the commission may recall a couple years ago, you had seen this project come before you. Essentially, the project has changed very slightly in that previously 81 units were proposed. The current proposal is 78. 24 of those are going to be located on that eastern portion that's multifamily apartment within the Brown Street specific plan area. And the remaining 54 units would be on the larger piece, which is general commercial zoned. Late materials were distributed to clarify that the access easement located on the west side of Phase 2 would actually be timed more appropriately with the Phase 2 development. So that would be condition number 6, minor modification there. Additionally, it should be noted that there was a numbering error in the conditions in the staff report. So should the Planning Commission move forward with an approval, the record would reflect that there are 18 conditions of approval. The applicant did reach out to staff for clarification on condition number 12, which relates to the sewer lift facility and the fact that the downstream operations are at capacity at this time. So condition number 12 recommends that the project enter into a development agreement with the city to pay a pro rata share for the improvements necessary to accommodate the project in terms of sewer. Additionally, the applicant had requested a clarification on condition number 10, which makes reference to regional storm drain improvements, which would satisfy SPA policy number 4.2. Staff did want to note that the This requirement would only pertain to the properties located within the specific plan area, so it's the 3 properties on the east side of the project site. The applicant had an engineer's estimate for that, that requirement, and staff did concur that the site would just be limited to the 3 parcels on the east side. So in terms of phasing, the east side of the project, Phase 1, would be built out with 2 buildings, parking and associated landscaping along the street frontage and other improvements. Additionally, the detention facility located on the northern part of the site plan within the Phase 2 area would be constructed with Phase 1. Phase 2 consists of 5 additional buildings on the west side of the project. And in terms of building our elevations in compliance with code, it does appear that the conceptual elevations do meet code. However, staff would conduct a full review of the project in its entirety in compliance with the code, and where applicable, the Brown Street requirements at the time building permit is proposed. Staff is recommending approval with the recommended conditions outlined in the staff report and the late materials, and with the updated numbering of the conditions. That concludes my presentation, and the applicant is present if you'd like to
Okay.
have him up. Thank you.
The questions for staff?
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Eswine?
Chairman. Go ahead.
Just one comment. In the staff report, you indicated that you're going to ask them to merge the parcels to create a single parcel. You're creating multiple zoning districts within a single parcel there. Is there any way that you can, at the same time, adjust the zoning so that it complies with what the parcel will be?
Thank you, Commissioner Eswine. Yes, the site will need to be merged into one parcel to accommodate the development. In terms of zoning, our code does allow for split-zoned properties and does have a mechanism for how development occurs, given that situation. Without the applicant requesting a zone change, that it really wouldn't be possible unless a zone change were being initiated. The project as it's being proposed does meet code, even with that split zoning, and so we are able to support the SUP as proposed.
You're telling me that the city on its own initiative can't require or request a zone change?
If it were initiated, and I do know that the Planning Commission does discuss master plan priorities each year, and that may be something that the commission may want to look at when you discuss your priorities for this next cycle.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Yes, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
I'm sorry,
I have-
Commissioner.
So I just had one, and I think I see this. All of the access for this complex is going to be off of Brown Street. Is that correct? Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Yes, that's correct.
So does the fire department require a second access in? Or just one?
So in this case, this does meet code, and I can turn it over to Stephen to further elaborate.
The fire department has reviewed this, and they did accept the single point of access.
Okay. And my second question, since we're talking about detention basins tonight, I see there's one here in the north part of it. Is there a drainage study on this one that says that's the right spot? Because there's another house there right next to it too.
There is a drainage study, and they also are providing drainage easements to move the overflow water out to the city facilities.
Okay, so there's an overflow to the detention basin.
Correct.
Gotcha, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? The applicant? So are you familiar with the 18 now?
Yes.
Conditions of approval?
Yes.
And the amendment to number 6? that says you will abandon that in phase two?
Yes.
Okay, are they acceptable?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Commissioners. The only comment that I have is I think that before we have applied for, we have written you and requested that this spa be looked at and perhaps abandoned, or at least the criteria for the spa to be changed. That went in written form to the Board of Supervisors. They approved it and sent it back to you. So when you do your master study, I would ask that you look at this in a little more detail and a little more clarity, because what is happening is when this was declared a spa, which is a special project area, we penalize people to build there. So you ask me as a developer, please come build, and oh, by the way, you're going to pay more than the guy next door to you who's out of the spa, because I don't know why. I never figured out why they did that, so I would request that you look at that. And that deals primarily with the fact that we are asked to contribute to the drainage in a financial way. And I just want to tell you that if we get approval tonight, we will probably like to request that the Board of Supervisors, we will appeal that to ask them to look at it. They're the only, you don't have a choice. You have to charge it. They may be able to remove that. If they don't, it's not a deal killer, but it's certainly not fair. We're currently working on the easement, and we're working with adjacent property owners, which the Advocates to End Domestic Violence has bought the property to the north of us and proposed to build interim housing in there. And we've worked very successfully with them in trying to take care of our drainage and their drainage. The city's worked with us. The planning staff did not do as prior planning staffs did, and that is they re-architected our buildings and cut out units, which once again, because it's a spa, that was their authority to come in and say, we don't like what it looks like, cut a couple of units off to make it look better. Well, that's their opinion, wasn't mine, but in order to comply, we had to do that. So therefore, that's another reason the spa is a little bit hard. But this staff has not in any way addressed that in any way, but so it's been fine and we've done good. The only thing we would like to have clarified, as we discussed maybe this evening, is that this special use permit, since it's a two-phase, we want to make sure that the special use permit stays in place through the second unit and we don't have to come back and reapply, because the special use permit applies to the phase two, the GC zoning, not to the one that we're doing now. That's already zoned multifamily. And we just want to clarify on the record that how long or what that SUP or what the city's requirements might be. Otherwise, we agree with all of the conditions and agree with everything.
Okay. Heather, you want to address that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So condition number 3 is taken from code, and it requires that the use that's approved shall commence within 12 months. What we have always interpreted that to be is that permits are sought and kept active for the life of the permit until it's completely constructed. So as long as the first permit comes in within that 12-month period and permits are continually taken out and construction continues, then the special use permit would be active through the construction of phase 2. There are also other options here, including extensions, as the commission and the applicant are aware, that are outlined in condition 3.
Okay.
That's fine.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. We got approval from you in 2019.
Yep.
What came in 2020? COVID. And quite frankly, we actually went through the major project review. Our engineer submitted plans for building permits in June. We let it expire because I'm telling you, it was hell to get people to sign. We had to get the lot lines deleted, and with COVID, try to find somebody that works for the power company that's in his office. Try to find somebody at cable TV. You don't even know where to go, and they're working from home. So we just want to be careful and cautious again. that we don't get caught in a trap where we lose our special use permit. And that's all. And we'll stay a little more on top of that year extension. So we're good with that.
Okay.
Good with that answer.
And as far as our earlier discussion about maybe considering the zoning and our annual review, you have any problem with that?
No, if you want to change the zoning, I don't know what advocates will do down on their property. I think they're zoned general commercial too, so I'm not, they may have already made application with staff. I'm sure they're talking because they're talking about easements and how to get in and out of there, so
Okay.
I don't really know that.
Well, our avenue to do that is our annual review, and I just, either that or either you have to initiate it, one or the other, so.
Well, you might look at all of that area out there because I know that the people to the south and east of me have the vacant land. It's where the old trailer park was. Remember the mobile home park? But they own everything outside of the spa adjacent to them. So as you're doing your review of this area, you might want to just take the zoning into consideration and make it easier for the development to occur there.
Okay.
In our particular case, I think it was just as easy to do the SUV or the SUP as opposed to asking for a zone change.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. Public comment? Anything from the public? Hearing none this time. Discussion? Anyone? Mr. Perry?
I have a question of city staff. So I'm not familiar with this SPA and the Brown Street SPA. Can anybody just kind of enlighten the history of that? Why it's a SPA that deals with the drainage in that area, right, before development's done?
So Commissioner Perry, since Hope's got a better history on this, I'd like to turn it over to her if that would be okay.
Hope Sullivan, Community Development Director. Mr. Millard's always explaining to me what he was told the history was, but from Walt Sullivan. Now he remembers. Anyway, my understanding is this was a blighted area. And so the idea was to focus in on this area. There was, I think, some either city-owned land or land that the city intended to acquire, and there was some master planning for that property as well. And this was looked at as a sort of revitalization tool. And the stormwater component of it was simply a component. But there's also other standards, which Mr. Millard sort of alluded to, where the front door has to face the sidewalk. You can't put parking between the building and the sidewalk. So some design criteria to encourage a more pedestrian-friendly design in that area. So, but I think overall it was looked at as an area that was somewhat blighted in that the specific plan could be a tool for revitalization.
Okay, thank you. So can I ask a question? I'm sorry, the applicant got away. What specifically in this SPA are you concerned about? Because I always concern myself when somebody's asking for a special use permit and then tells me he's going to appeal it to the city supervisors.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Perry. The two main things that's part of it is architectural. And let me give you an example. We built a building exactly like what we're proposing here. They're 12 units, and actually they're very nice because they're 6 2-bedroom, 2-bath units and 6 3-bedroom, 2-bath units. And you find very few apartments in Carson that have 3 bedrooms. Even lower workforce housing people sometimes have kids. So the 3 bedrooms are nice. We originally designed it at the back of the lot with the parking in the front on Edmonds. And then was told, no, we have to move the building to the front. So the parking has to go in the back. Well, if you can imagine going to Smith's and parking in the back to get your groceries, that's the same thing here. You come home, you park in the back, you got to walk all the way around the building. So we, at an additional expense of ourselves, split the building on the lower floor to walk through, which was all very expensive because it was already designed, ready to go, and we had to redesign make the foundation bigger. So it was very costly to accommodate it so the people didn't walk around the building. When we built the 55 units just down the street, and they face both streets, the units face both streets, with the exception of Edmonds, really doesn't. But there is where, and it was Director Sullivan at that time, said it was 3 stories, and there was 4 units. So it was like 12. Take off the top 2, just take them off. I think it looks better. Well, he thought it looked better. I didn't think it looked better. The other buildings had the top 2 floors. But that amounts to, let's say in today's pay, $1,200, between $1,000 and $1,200 a month for 2 units. That already has a foundation and a roof. All you had is just the walls. So it cost me $2,400 a month for what, 5 years? At what reason? It looks better. I don't know if you guys drove by and said, wow, that looks a whole lot better than the other ones, but nobody does. It was a matter of preference. And I'm saying those items right there are very detrimental to somebody that, and I'm not talking about myself because I probably won't build in there. We probably own 1/3 of the GPA area. So you still got 2/3 of it that has to be developed. Most of it's mobile homes, most of it is it is blighted area. There is one brand new house in there right adjacent to us that somebody bought and finished and fixed it up and looks very nice. But if you're going to try to entice other builders to come in and spend their money in there, I think we need to be careful. The current staff has worked well with us. I mean, we don't have any problem with that. But in the time before, we were just told you'll cut 2 or we won't approve it.
So is your concern the one that's already built or this one? And I'm unclear on that.
The only thing that no, architectural, they have seen it and they've agreed to it. And parking is, we've done the parking on the end so you don't walk around the buildings. And the first building faces the street and it's landscaped in front. And so it meets all the criteria of what they wanted to do in the zone of GPA, in the SPA, I'm sorry. So we've met the criteria of the spa, but you don't always have that luxury and therefore, and there's no leeway. So then you it's going to cost you or something's going to happen. In this case, you park at the end instead of behind it. The other one that we built over on Edmonds became a complete, I wouldn't want to rent an apartment where I lived in the back and had to pack all my groceries all the way around the building. I mean, that's asking people to do quite a bit. And that's the only concern. The other concern I have is the fact that I don't know what issues you pay more money on. We have a retention basin. When that retention water flows right down, we can almost flow directly to the river. So I've kind of pointed out to the city over the years, and I'm not sure I've gotten through, is that retention basins that are close to the river don't want to stop water very long. That's like saying that you have a theater, and when you yell fire, you hold the people in the back row up, you retain them for a while. Well, you don't want to do that. You want them to start moving right now. You get out. You retain the people in the front to hold them back so that the flow is solid. And so we're close to the river, but there's a retention basin there that will accommodate everything that we need to retain and put out.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Heather?
Dwight's addressed it, but just maybe not as directly. In conversations with him on the phone over the past couple of days, the reason that he's thinking about appealing, and he can confirm this after I state it, is related to condition number 10, where it requires a pro rata share based on regional storm drain improvements. And where that comes from is the SPA policy 4.2, which requires development to contribute toward the improvements of drainage facilities within this area. And so that's the item that Mr. Millard had discussed with me earlier.
Which is an item we can't do anything about.
Correct. And I expect, you don't even really have to address it. and we're not sure. I may have misunderstood the part about the sewer part. There's a lift station down Morgan Mill, and it was my first understanding that we were contributing to the lift station because we were in the spa. But I may have been corrected, and I'm waiting to get it clarified, is no, anybody that builds that impacts that lift station has to contribute their prorated share. If that's the case, I don't have an argument there.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other discussion? Motion? Commissioner Wiggins?
I move to recommend approval of special use permit LU-2021-0449 based on the ability to make the required findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report and amended in staff's memo dated January 25th, 2022.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Perry seconds. Any further discussion?
Just would like to clarify, this is not a recommendation, this is for approval.
Yes.
He said,
Said recommendation. Okay,
I move to recommend approval.
okay.
Oh, I just read it.
You move to approve, right? Okay.
Are we stated correctly?
staff report is correct.
Yes, okay.
I move to recommend approval.
Are we set?
Motion.
And a second? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Opposed, no. Motion carried.
Yeah, I was reading the amended one.
All right. LU 2021-0452. Discussion and possible action regarding a request for a special use permit to allow alternative compliance of the downtown mixed-use standards, specifically standards related to the mixed-use requirement, the sidewalk specification, transparency, and building envelope setback requirements relating to a multifamily residential development on property zoned downtown mixed use located at 201 East William Street and 222 East Washington Street. APN 002-161-06 and 002-161-07. Heather.
Thank you.
Heather 1.
Heather Ferris for the record. The project involves two adjacent parcels totaling 4.93 acres in size. It is located on the south side of East William Street and is also bound by North Plaza, East Washington, and North Stewart Streets. It's located within the downtown mixed-use zoning district, and the larger of the two parcels is also located within the historic district. Because a portion of the project site is located in the historic district, review and approval by the Historic Resources Commission is also required. The HRC reviewed the project on September 9th, 2021 for compliance with Carson City Historic District guidelines and approved the project subject to conditions. The applicant is proposing to construct a 207-unit apartment complex, which will require all existing buildings on the properties to be demolished. So that includes the existing buildings that front on East William, and then the buildings that are at the corner of North Plaza and East Washington.
At the coin shop?
I think so, yes. So a multifamily apartment use is an allowed use within the downtown mixed-use zoning district, subject to meeting the standards outlined in Division 6 of the Development Standards. However, the applicant may seek a special use permit to allow for alternative compliance with those standards. The applicant is seeking alternative compliance for the mix of uses, the streetscape as it relates to sidewalk width, street level interest and transparency, and building step back. Division 6.5.3 of the development standards requires projects larger than 50,000 square feet in size to include at least one use from a commercial service and retail use group. The applicant's proposing the project to be entirely residential. Staff finds that that developing the project entirely residential is consistent with the urban mixed-use area because there's commercial spaces and government buildings surrounding the property. Given the proximity to these uses, the urban scale residential development will complete these existing uses, creating more of a mixed-use node than what exists currently. Division 6.6.7, subsection 3 requires a 15-foot sidewalk for urban character projects. However, as I indicated, the applicant is proposing strictly residential and is therefore requesting a reduced sidewalk width to be consistent with the residential use. The applicant is proposing an 8-foot sidewalk along North Stewart Street and North Plaza Street with a 5-foot planting area between the sidewalk and the street, and an additional planting strip between the sidewalk and the building. 10-foot sidewalks will be along East William Street with a 9-foot planting area between the building and the sidewalk, and a 10-foot sidewalk with a planting area on both sides of the sidewalk is proposed along East Washington. So again, with the elimination of the mixed use, staff finds that the reduced sidewalk width is appropriate as it'll be purely residential. Division 6.6.7 also discusses street level transparency. That's Division 6.6.10. For a purely residential project, a minimum of 35% transparency is required for projects in the urban mixed-use character area, which this project is. This means that glazing and ground floor windows are required to be transparent into common hallways and entryways, but can be translucent or opaque when necessary to protect privacy into dwellings. As I noted in the staff report, staff was requiring a condition to demonstrate compliance with this 35% transparency at the time of building permit. However, staff did continue to have discussions with the applicant, and the applicant provided information indicating that they're not able to meet the transparency on Building B. However, they can meet it on every other building. Additionally, so with Building B, the way that it's oriented, access to the storage areas and utility areas is facing North Plaza. So that doesn't provide for transparency. However, there will be a landscape buffer there to kind of shield the appearance of those access to those utility closets. And additionally, they are able to meet the combined total of 35% transparency for the entire project site. So staff is recommending a modification to Condition 8 as outlined in the memo, which you received as late material. I'd be happy to go over that if you'd like me to read it into the record. Otherwise, you do have it in front of you. And then finally, the applicant is also requesting an alternate standard for the step back requirements outlined in Division 6.7 of the development standards. So after 3 stories, the building should step back 25 feet along the north and south streets and 25 feet from the east and west streets. The applicant is proposing a minimum of a 10-foot step back, ranging up to a 23.5-foot step back. The step back is intended to help create a more inviting and pedestrian-friendly environment. So in this case, there will be varied step backs that range again from 10 to 23.5 feet. In addition, the landscape areas on either side of the sidewalks provide for more of a setback as well. So it leaves for more open air feeling in that area as well. So given the overall design, staff finds that the reduced step back will be consistent with the intent of the requirement. So as I indicated, I provided you with a memo with late material. where I was recommending changes to condition 8. I'm also recommending an additional condition that was erroneously left out of the staff report. Because this is occurring over 2 parcels, we do want a lot line deletion, so we don't have any issues with any setbacks or anything. So I am recommending an additional condition 13 to read, a lot line deletion shall be completed prior to issuance of any building permits. Staff has made all required findings in the affirmative and is recommending approval subject to the conditions of approval included in the staff report and amended in my memo dated January 25th, 2022. We did receive one written public comment, which was provided to you as late material. I'm available for questions, and the applicant, Tony Hama, is also here and available. Okay, Stephen has a clarification as well.
Okay, Stephen?
Stephen Pote with Development Engineering. An item that was discussed with the applicant in the NPR process, which is prior to the special use permit, had to do with one of the code conditions. So our development standards require frontage improvements. And there is a city project planned on the East Williams Street frontage. So what we discussed was that rather than being required to install those, they would just provide the amount that they would have been spending on that frontage towards that project, rather than installing it and having it removed and replaced right afterwards.
Okay.
So it's
Is that
just a
acceptable
clarification
with
on
the
that.
city staff?
Correct.
Questions of staff?
I noticed over on the Plaza Street property side that there's numerous telephone poles, electrical poles, and they're doubled up, and they are kind of low hanging, and then there's upper hanging. And I saw here that there was nothing that was requiring that electrical to go underground. Is there anything required to go ahead and consolidate the electrical on the taller poles rather than the smaller ones, considering that we're putting in trees and so forth that are going to be a problem with them in the future?
Stephen Pote with Development Engineering for the record. Typically, the way we enforce the undergrounding requirements are with facilities that are going through a project rather than on the street frontage. And if I'm understanding you correctly, the doubling up you're referring to, I believe, is a difference in the utility that's there. So the higher level is the electrical, and then below that you have the communications lines, but I may have been misunderstanding.
Well, that may be, but I guess the question is, are they going to stay there? We're going to have to design around the telephone poles.
The applicant may wish to speak to that, and they may have plans.
Okay. Commissioner Wiggins? Not yet, but come up, please. Commissioner Wiggins?
Sure. Two things for staff. In the applicant's documents, there was something called farm parameters. Do you know what that is? And maybe the applicant could actually answer that too. I've never seen that many.
Yeah, sure. Commissioner Wiggins, one of the requirements was to provide information on adjacent property owners. So I contacted First American Title Company, and when they put together a list like that, they call it a farm because they're farming information, I guess. So that's why they label that report farm parameters, but really it's just a database list that was generated from a property search.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question for staff is, and you can thank my wife for this one, who drives on Stewart Street. She has concerns of all the traffic being funneled into Stewart Street, and that's heavily traveled. There's going to be no turn lane there. It's just 4 lanes, I believe, with just a center line. Am I seeing that correctly, that there's only one entry and exit primary And then just that's the emergency one down on Plaza?
Stephen Pote with Development Engineering. So there's an entrance on Plaza. That's a fully functioning entrance and exit. And then they are required to meet the minimum distancing requirements for their entrances.
You said the Plaza Street is a regular entrance? Because on these plans, it looks like there's a gate there.
Is it? Okay. I was mistaken on that.
So the only entrance and exit of the property is through Stewart Street.
Correct. Stewart Street is the only entrance. And based on the traffic study that we had prepared for the project, that seemed appropriate. The peak morning and evening traffic, as calculated going in and out of the project, was not considered burdensome to the existing infrastructure around the property.
Excuse me, when did you have that traffic study done? The reason I'm saying that is because of COVID, most of the state offices have been closed. And what you've got is you've got Stewart Street as the main arterial for the people to go down Stewart Street. They spread out on William Street to either catch the freeway or to head out to Dayton. And right now, if you're heading north on Stewart Street, you have a turn lane that will let you turn to the west. The one lane, and you only have one lane there, is either the one that goes through all the way through to Roop, or you have to wait for the people, if they're not going to Roop, make that right-hand turn lane. It's all shared. So there's only two. And during high traffic times, when the state offices are closed and when people leave, that backs up all the way to Musser. So that's what I'm concerned about. If this is going to be the only entrance and exit out of here, this is going to create an additional bottleneck, which is not even a half block away.
If I may, Chair. Stephen Pote, Development Engineering. And I probably should have brought this up when Commissioner Wiggins was asking about the entrances. So the engineering staff does have concerns with the traffic impact analysis. However, since this particular special use permit is specific to the sidewalk and frontage improvements and setbacks, it's not material to the special use that's being requested. So that, as staff was determined to be deferred to the building permit to get those reports updated.
You're saying that our special use permit that we're considering tonight doesn't consider traffic?
Correct.
Heather Ferris for the record, if I can clarify. So this special use permit is focused on the alternative standards that he's requesting. So the multifamily apartment use is an allowed use in this zoning district. What you guys are focused on is the alternative standards. The traffic will be dealt with at the time of building permit as if it would if they were not requesting a special use permit for alternative standards.
In other words, if we were just building a plain old apartment house, and we met all these standards, we wouldn't even be here.
Correct.
And that the problem with traffic and the other things would be handled administratively.
Correct.
Okay.
And that will be the case here.
Okay.
If I may, I'd also like to address Commissioner Preston's question about the timing of the traffic study. I believe that the submittal date for this package was December 16th. The traffic study was completed approximately a week prior to submission, so it is a recent report.
Okay. Are there any other questions for staff?
Or the applicant?
No, I'm coming to the applicant.
Okay.
I want to get there. All right. Now, sir, pardon? Oh, hey, Commissioner Lloyd, go ahead.
So I think this might end up being for staff, for Heather. Is there any environmental cleanup that will happen prior to construction due to the previous use, with being the B&T roundhouse, or would that also be dealt with administratively?
So we've, Tony Hama, the applicant, so we've agreed, and I believe it may have been a condition in the NPR or the HRC approval that we would be conducting field monitoring during all excavation and trenching activities. So we will have a qualified environmental engineer monitoring the work that is happening at the property. And we would follow, NDEP protocol for any stained soils or odors that were detected during construction. So there will be monitoring of all underground activity as the project is being constructed.
Is that okay? All right. There we're a little bit ahead of ourselves, but there are 13 conditions of approval. Have you read them, and are they acceptable to you?
Yes, we've read all of the conditions proposed by staff, and we accept them in their entirety with no modifications.
Okay. How do you envision this traffic problem being solved? I don't want to get these guys way down the road and all of a sudden they're putting in an overpass.
So staff will work with their transportation engineer, and we'll just have to take it one step at a time.
Nice tap dance. Okay. Is there any questions for the developer? Commissioner Perry?
Yes. So I'm going to come at this from just a little different, with perhaps more of a suggestion. We only got 2 public comments on this, right? One was that, gee, this was the site of the old roundhouse, a historical site for Carson City. You can see pictures of it probably as you went through this. And I think one comment was, can you design it to look like, a train station or something? And I realized that's probably not something that's in the works. The other was a gentleman that was here at the very beginning that said, this is a piece of the history here. So I don't know how to go about this, or even if I can, but it seemed to me like both of those could be addressed and provide something like we have on the West Side Historic District by putting some kind of wayfinding sign or a plaque that shows a picture of this thing on one of these sidewalks, so as people are walking around, they can see what it looked like historically. So I'm not going to try and make that a requirement, but I think that's a suggestion that would maybe make this, it's got some great sidewalks in it. And I look at that corner of Plaza and East Washington, knowing that the bus stop is right down here. People walk along it. That to me would be a really nice thing to do for the city.
Yeah, so there's actually been quite a bit of discussion around the historical significance of this property. And, we've worked with city staff and, had a meeting with the Historic Resources Commission. And the design that you see today reflects some of the recommendations from the HRC. At one point, there were like historic arches that were proposed to be part of this project, but my understanding is that they were used for another purpose. We were planning to incorporate those arches into this project, and I believe it might have been at the major project review where it was discussed that though this project is located in the historic district, the intent was not to try to create a historic project per se, because the downtown mixed-use area is really designed to promote modern building design and architecture. But what we've tried to do is pay homage to some of that turn-of-the-century architecture by including brick accents and additional stone at the base of the buildings at the request of the Historic Resource Commission. We have quite a bit of, painted steel and metal flashing, kind of what you might see more on Carson Street. So we're trying to have the design of and the architecture of the building, meet both
what is, being requested under the DTMU, and also try to pay tribute to the historic significance of the property,
So you've been through this already, huh?
once or twice.
Okay, thanks. I just had to get that out.
Any other comments? Commissioner Lloyd.
I see in the detailed project description provided by the applicant, electric vehicle charging stations will be included throughout the site. I was just wondering how many of those. I don't necessarily see them on any of the plans.
We don't have an exact figure for that at this time. The other project that we're going to be constructing here in Carson City, it's smaller in unit count. It's about 140, and I believe we have 3 vehicle charging stations for that property. So I would envision we'd have somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 or 6 here.
Your rendering on Plaza Street shows a lot of cracks in the concrete. Is that for real, or are they artificially inserted? Plaza Street's full of cracks.
It's stamped concrete, right?
I'm sorry, I digressed. Yeah, any other comments or questions for the applicant or staff? All right, let's talk about this. Any comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right.
I preface that by saying I think that this is a great addition. This is exactly what the downtown mixed use needs to get things moving along. There's more people walking around. And I think this project, if it finishes up, will achieve a lot of that. With that said, I move to approve LU-2020-0452 based on the findings and subject to the conditions contained in the staff report and the addendum dated January 25th, 2022.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Perry, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, guys. All right, now, before we take a 10-minute break, item 6A for possible action, discussion and election of the Planning Commission chair and vice chair. In accordance with our bylaws, at this meeting every year, we elect a chairman and a vice chairman. The chairman can only serve for 2 consecutive terms, and therefore the floor is open for nominations for a chairman of this commission starting next month. Commissioner Eswine.
Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate Jay Wiggins for the position of chair and Richard Perry for the vice chair.
All right. Is there a second? All right, well, you can do that.
I make a motion to agree with the first part of Commissioner Eswine and Terry Preston for vice chair.
Okay.
I second.
I withdraw my my motion for the second part.
All right. All right, so we have a motion on the floor to accept Commissioner Wiggins as president and Commissioner Preston as vice chair, chair and vice chair, I'm sorry. Any further nominations or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Yes,
So the
ma'am.
motion was by Commissioner Eswine, seconded by Vice Chair Wiggins? Is that, okay,
Yeah, it was amended by
Okay.
Commissioner Perry.
with an amendment, yes, but I just wanted to make sure I have it.
Okay. You want to do the rest of this? Have at it.
Okay, item number 7. Staff reports. Hope?
Yes, at the board meeting January 20th, they had a lot of activity that made its way through you to them. They looked at the second readings of the zoning map amendments on Lapeer and on Highway 50. Those were part of the master plan updates and did amend those as you had suggested. They reviewed the zoning map amendment on Fairview, where it was those 2 parcels, but you were concerned about a non-conforming parcel, and they went with your recommendation. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There was a lot of discussion about it, just like you had a lot of discussion. They reviewed and approved the tentative map over at Lampa that you had seen that did not, you remember it was less lots and it didn't have the access up to William Street, that one. So they did approve that tentative map. They did review Title 18, but it was an informal review. What it was I gave them an update on your action. And in general, they had discussion. They did not vote on anything. But it seemed like there was not support for those metal containers, those sort of cargo containers in backyards. Also, there seemed to be support for the rentals of the accessory dwelling units, although they did want a larger lot. I think the commission recommended a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet, and they were looking at more like the 12,000. So the 12,000 square foot lot. And also with respect to personal storage, you'll recall you had that U-Haul on State Street. And there was a limitation that couldn't be more than 14 feet tall because it was adjacent to residential. And the board felt that in the case of personal storage, it was a lot of what your conversation was it really, if a different building could be of a certain height based on the zoning, why penalize this particular use and just subject the height to whatever the base zoning says the height is. But again, there was no vote. It was just discussion. And then they also reviewed the master plan annual report, and they agreed with all of your recommendations, but they also added direction to the staff to prepare a comprehensive list of mapping corrections. So they don't like this coming forward piecemeal. So you just had the situation on Brown Street. And I think if this multifamily is constructed, and we'll see what Advocates does, that would be something that would make it onto the list if we start to see inconsistencies between the land use and the zoning, just so that the zoning was more consistent. They also talked about the zoning for the V&T specific plan and how that zoning, we're supposed to be looking at that as part of the master plan to ensure that we're implementing the V&T specific plan, which talks about that area being a gateway into the city and sort of a tourism area and so on. So they recognize that the things that Planning Commission had submitted to them, and particularly the rewrite of Title 18, is absolutely the priority. But they suggested perhaps staff would need to get some type of consultant to look at these mapping corrections so that we would have this comprehensive list. And they do want us to look at the V&T zoning, but Title 18 is absolutely the priority. So it was a really interesting meeting. In terms of items coming up, do we have our due date yet for next month? Okay. Okay. We're not prepared to report out on what will be before you at your next meeting. It will probably be part of Title 18. If it's a light agenda, I'll try to get going on the chapters you haven't seen yet.
Thank you, Hope. Any commissioner reports or comments? Seeing none, now is the time for public comment. The public is invited at this time to comment on, and there is no public. So
Unless
I
Heather
guess
wants to say something.
We'll move right ahead to number 9 for possible action adjournment.
Can I do this for you?
Yeah. So moved.
Congratulations, both of you.